Alarcon in autumn. The Yukar River, a silver ribbon, snaked around the base of the ancient town, its stone walls the colour of old parchment under a pale Castilian sky. Leaves, brittle and gold, skittered across cobblestones worn smooth by centuries. Within these walls, in a narrow, shadowed lane, stood the house of Arturo Valerio, and beside it, silent as a crypt, his Luthier's workshop. For 2 years, since Sophia, his Sophia, had been sung to her final rest, the workshop door had remained locked. Arturo at 80 felt as ancient and crumbling as the town's farthest ramparts. His days were a meagre ritual, stale bread softened in weak coffee, the television flickering unwatched, his gaze often lost on the dust motes dancing in the thin shafts of autumn light that pierced the gloom of his small living room. His hands, once so deft, so intimately familiar with the soul of wood, were now gnarled claws, stiff with arthritis, aching with a phantom throb that was as much sorrow as ailment. "Para qué?" he'd mutter, when the thought of his tools, his precious woods, flickered. For what? The music had died with her. He ignored the calls from his son in Madrid, the concerned inquiries from the few remaining neighbours. Their pity was a shroud he refused to wear. He had his memories, sharp and bittersweet, and the suffocating blanket of his grief. It was enough, or so he told himself. Then Elena arrived. Unannounced, a whirlwind of youthful energy and city anxieties, his granddaughter stood on his doorstep, her bright Madrid scarf a jarring splash of colour against the muted tones of his existence. She was 25, a graphic designer with kind eyes that widened in dismay as she took in his stooped frame, the neglect clinging to the air of the house, the palpable absence of life. "Abuelo," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "I was worried. You haven't been answering." Arturo merely grunted, shuffling aside to let her in, the unexpected intrusion already a burden. Elena's visit, intended for a few days, stretched as her concern deepened. She remembered the workshop from childhood visits, a magical cave filled with the scent of cedar and varnish, the promise of music taking shape in her grandfather's strong, capable hands. Now, its locked door seemed to emanate a chill. One afternoon, as she coaxed him to eat a bowl of the warm lentil soup she'd made, she broached the subject that had been hovering between them. "Abuelo," she began tentatively, "I heard about a girl in the village, Ana Gomez. They say she plays the traditional songs beautifully, but her requinto, it's falling apart. Her family can't afford a new one." She paused, watching his impassive face. "I was thinking, knowing how you used to." Arturo's head snapped up, his faded hazel eyes, usually clouded, flashing with a spark of old fire, quickly doused by bitterness. "These hands?" He held them up, trembling slightly, the joints swollen. "This life?" He gestured around the dim, dusty room. "It's finished, Elena. Finished." The words were like stones dropped into a well. Elena, though disheartened, was not so easily deterred. She possessed a quiet persistence inherited, perhaps, from Sophia. She began not with arguments, but with actions. She aired out the stale rooms, letting in the crisp Alarcon air. She cleaned, gently but thoroughly, the layers of dust that had settled like a second skin over Arturo's life. She cooked simple, nourishing meals, sopa de ajo, pisto manchego, the forgotten aromas of Sophia's kitchen slowly, hesitantly re-emerging. Arturo watched, his resistance a silent, brooding presence. "Leave an old man to his dust, Nina," he'd grumble, but he ate the food, a flicker of something other than apathy in his eyes. One morning, armed with a hesitant permission extracted from Arturo, "Do what you want, it's all decaying anyway," Elena found the old key to the workshop. The lock protested with a rusty shriek. Inside, the air was thick, heavy with the scent of aged wood, varnish, and something else, a profound, settled sadness. Dust lay like a shroud over everything. The workbench, the rows of tools hanging on the wall, the ghostly outlines of instruments never finished. Elena moved carefully, uncovering treasures. Chisels and planes, their edges still keen beneath the grime. Blocks of wood, spruce, cypress, rosewood, their grains holding silent symphonies. In a drawer she found faded photographs. A younger Arturo, his face alight with passion, Sophia laughing beside him, her arms around a newly finished guitar. Tucked beneath them, a stack of Sophia's hand-copied folk music scores, her neat calligraphy tracing melodies that had once filled this space. Arturo, drawn by an unacknowledged pull, stood in the doorway, a gaunt silhouette. Seeing Elena hold Sophia's music, a tremor ran through him. She loved the Jotas, he said, his voice raspy, unexpected. It was the most he'd spoken in days. The memories, sharp and poignant, pierced through his carefully constructed numbness. He turned away, retreating to the shadows of his living room, but something had shifted. The past, exhumed, was no longer just pain. It was also a reminder of love, of life. A few days later, the inevitable happened. Reaching for a book on a high shelf, a wave of dizziness, born of weakness and poor nutrition, overcame Arturo. He stumbled, his hip cracking against the edge of a heavy oak chest. The pain was sharp, immediate. Elena, rushing in, found him pale and shaken. "Abuelo, that's enough," she declared, her usual gentleness replaced by a firm resolve. "We're seeing Dr. Fuentes." Dr. Isabel Fuentes was a woman in her late 30s, her practice the only one in Alarcón. Her eyes were kind but missed nothing. After a thorough examination and x-rays, her assessment was compassionate but blunt. "Arturo," she said, her gaze steady, "you have advanced osteoarthritis, yes. But much of this weakness, this pain, is exacerbated by severe muscle atrophy and malnutrition. Your body is starving, and your joints are seizing up from disuse." She prescribed anti-inflammatory medication, but emphasized its limitations. Pills are not a solution, only a temporary aid. Your hands, your whole body, need gentle, purposeful movement. You need proper food, real fuel. If you continue like this... She let the sentence hang, the unspoken implication clear. "Your hands," she added, looking directly at his gnarled fingers. "They need care and work, Arturo, not abandonment. They were made to create, no?" Arturo remained silent, but Elena saw a flicker of something. Shame? Defiance in his eyes. Elena, armed with Dr. Fuentes' advice, redoubled her efforts. She researched hand exercises for musicians, gentle stretches. She sought out recipes for nutrient-rich Castilian dishes, easy for him to digest. She'd leave a warm bowl of caldo by his chair, a plate of fresh fruit. She'd gently take his hand, trying to guide him through the exercises. Just a little, abuelo, for Sofia. He would pull away, but less forcefully each time. He was observing, a reluctant student to her quiet care. It was Miguel Romero's visit that provided the next crucial nudge. Miguel, a contemporary of Arturo's, his face a road map of laughter lines, was a local musician, his bandurria still lively at village fiestas. He'd heard Elena was in town and arrived one afternoon, his presence filling the somber house with a gust of remembered cheer. "Arturo, hombre," still hiding from the world. Miguel boomed, clapping him on the shoulder. He spoke of the old days, of the music that had coursed through Alarcón's veins, of Arturo's requintos, legendary for their sweet, clear tone. "A crying shame no one makes them like you used to, eh? Young Ana Gomez, you know her? Talent like a songbird, but her instrument, que lastima! It fights her every note." He didn't press, didn't overtly challenge Arturo's silence, but his words, combined with Elena's patient efforts and Dr. Fuentes' stark warning, began to erode the wall of Arturo's despair. Later that week alone, Arturo found himself drawn to the workshop. The dust motes danced in the single shaft of light from the grimy window. His gaze fell upon a particular piece of cypress, set aside years ago, its pale, fine grain promising resonance. He picked it up, the wood cool and smooth beneath his hesitant fingers. And then it came. A memory so vivid it stole his breath. Sofia, her dark hair catching the sunlight in this very workshop, humming a haunting Castilian folk tune, the melody weaving through the rhythmic scrape of his plane as he worked on a guitar for her. Her smile, the scent of lemon from her hands. A choked sob escaped him. The grief was still there, a vast ocean, but beneath it something else stirred, a longing, an echo of the craftsman he once was. He thought of young Anna, her supposed talent stifled. He thought of Sofia's music, silenced. He thought of his hands, useless. He walked over to Elena, who was quietly mending one of Sofia's old shawls in the living room. He stood before her, the piece of cypress held almost reverently. "Perhaps," he said, his voice a low rumble, "perhaps I will look at the wood, for Anna." Elena's needle stilled. She looked up, her eyes shining. She didn't speak, merely nodded, a small, hopeful smile gracing her lips. The reawakening was agonizingly slow. The hand exercises Dr. Fuentes had prescribed were torture at first. Each stretch, each clench, sent splinters of pain through his joints. "Poco a poco, abuelo," Elena would murmur, her touch gentle as she massaged his stiff fingers with warm olive oil. He began to eat the food she prepared, the rich broths, the stews full of vegetables, the fresh goat cheese from the local market. Slowly, a sliver of strength returned. Elena helped him in the workshop. They cleaned, organized a small, manageable space. She found an old adjustable stool, raised the workbench slightly to ease his stooped posture. She improved the lighting, replacing the single dim bulb with a brighter, warmer one. His first attempts at craft were fumbling, frustrating. Sharpening a chisel, his hand trembled so violently he nearly sliced his thumb. Planning a piece of scrap wood, the tool chattered and skipped. "No puedo," he'd hiss, ready to abandon it all. But Elena's quiet presence, her unwavering belief, kept him tethered, and the memory of Sophia's song. Miguel started visiting more regularly, bringing his bandurria. At first, Arturo just listened, his face impassive. Then, one evening, Miguel coaxed him to pick up an old, half-finished vihuela. Arturo's fingers, stiff and clumsy, fumbled for the chords. The notes were hesitant, discordant, but they were notes. Music, however faint, began to breathe again in the dusty workshop. Miguel, wise enough not to praise too soon, simply nodded. The wood remembers, Arturo. The hands, too, they will remember. The decision to make the requinto for Ana became a tangible goal, an anchor. He unrolled old plans, his own meticulous drawings from years past. His hand, though still shaky, moved with a nascent confidence as he sketched modifications, adapting to the specific qualities of the aged cypress. Elena, fascinated, began to document his process, taking photographs with her phone, writing notes in a small journal. "People should know about this, abuelo, about your craft." Miguel, true to his nature, let the news slip out in the Tasca. "Arturo Valerio is making a requinto again." Some old-timers nodded sagely, others were skeptical. His hands, after all this time? The whispers reached Arturo, stirring a stubborn pride. One evening, Miguel persuaded Arturo to accompany him to the Tasca. It was a small, informal gathering, a few local musicians sharing tunes. And there was Ana Gomez, a slip of a girl with serious eyes, coaxing melodies from a battered, undersized requinto. Her talent was undeniable, a raw, intuitive musicality that shone through the instrument's deficiencies. Watching her, listening to the sweet, struggling notes, Arturo felt a profound stirring. This was not just about wood and strings. This was about legacy, about passing on the music. His resolve hardened. The work on the requinto became the rhythm of his days. It was a constant negotiation with his body. Good days, when his fingers felt almost nimble, were interspersed with bad days, when the arthritis flared and every movement was an agony. He learned to listen to his body, to rest when needed, to adapt his techniques. He discovered that warming his hands in heated sand before starting helped. Elena became his unofficial apprentice, fetching tools, holding pieces steady as he glued them, learning the names of the woods, the feel of the different rasps and files. They developed a quiet, companionable rhythm, their conversations often unspoken, communicated through shared focus on the task at hand. His health visibly improved. The stoop in his shoulders lessened. His eyes, once dull, now held a focused intensity. He ate with appetite, even venturing to the market with Elena, pointing out the best vegetables, the freshest fish. The town of Alarcon, which had seemed a tomb, began to feel like home again. Early winter settled over Alarcon, the air sharp and clear, the ancient stones of the town dusted with occasional frost. The requinto, under Arturo's patient, increasingly steady hands, was nearing completion. It was a thing of beauty, the cypress back and sides glowing with a warm honeyed hue, the spruce top fine-grained and resonant. He had decided to gift it to Ana during the Fiesta de San Anton, a small, intimate celebration in mid-January, where the townspeople gathered for bonfires and the blessing of animals. It felt right, a quiet offering back to the community, to the music. Only one task remained, one final touch, a small, intricate inlay on the headstock. It was a design Sophia had sketched years ago, a delicate spray of almond blossoms, her favourite. He wanted this requinto to carry her memory. He chose mother of pearl, its iridescent sheen, a counterpoint to the warm wood. But this delicate work, requiring the utmost precision, became a supreme test. His fingers, though stronger, still ached. The tiny pieces of pearl slipped, the fine saw blade threatened to wander. Days turned into a week of frustrating, painstaking effort. The pain in his hands became a constant, throbbing companion. Doubts gnawed at him. Perhaps he had aimed too high. Perhaps his hands truly were, as he had first believed, finished. One evening, After a particularly agonizing session where a crucial piece of pearl snapped under his unsteady pressure, he slumped onto his stool, despair washing over him. "No puedo," he whispered, the words a surrender. "I cannot do this." Elena found him there, his head in his hands. She didn't offer platitudes. She simply sat beside him, gently taking his swollen hand, massaging the stiff joints with the practiced care she had developed. "Take a rest, abuelo," she said softly. "Tomorrow is another day. Sophia would understand." Miguel arrived later, bringing a small flask of Resolí, Alarcon's potent spiced liqueur. He didn't mention the inlay directly, but spoke of perseverance, of the fire that still burned in old craftsmen. "The wood tests you, Arturo. Always. It wants to know if you are worthy." Their quiet faith, Elena's unwavering support, Miguel's gruff encouragement, and above all, the vivid memory of Sophia's smile as she'd drawn the almond blossoms, these things coalesced within him. That night, Arturo returned to the workshop alone. The town was silent, asleep under a canopy of brilliant winter stars. He lit the stove, warmed his hands, and picked up his finest saw. He worked with a singular, almost prayerful focus. The world narrowed to the tiny piece of pearl, the delicate lines of the design. He breathed with the wood, with the memory of Sophia. Pain was a distant hum, overridden by a profound sense of purpose. As the first pale light of dawn crept over the battlements of Alarcon's castle, the inlay was complete, flawless. Each tiny petal of mother-of-pearl nestled perfectly against the dark rosewood of the headstock. Arturo leaned back, his body aching, his eyes burning with fatigue, but a deep, quiet satisfaction settled in his soul. He had not been defeated. The night of San Anton was cold and clear. A large bonfire blazed in the small plaza before the ancient church, its flames leaping towards the starry sky, casting dancing shadows on the weathered stone facades. The scent of wood smoke and roasting chestnuts filled the air. A small crowd of townsfolk had gathered, their faces ruddy in the firelight, their breath misting in the chill. Arturo stood a little apart, Elena by his side, Miguel beaming nearby. He held the requinto, its polished surface gleaming. Ana Gomez, her parents beside her, watched him with wide, expectant eyes. When the moment came, Arturo stepped forward. His voice, when he spoke, was not loud, but it carried in the crisp air. "Ana," he said, "this instrument, it holds old memories and new hopes. May it sing for you and for Alarcon." He presented the requinto. Ana took it with trembling hands, her eyes shining with unshed tears. For a moment she just held it, tracing the delicate almond blossom inlay with a fingertip. Then she settled it against her small fingers finding the strings, and she played. The notes that emerged were not the struggling sounds of her old instrument. They were clear, resonant, full of a sweet, vibrant life. A traditional jota, a melody as old as the stones of Alarcon, filled the plaza, weaving through the crackle of the bonfire, silencing the chatter of the crowd. The music spoke of joy, of sorrow, of the enduring spirit of the land. Arturo watched, a profound peace settling over him. His hands ached, yes, but it was a worthy ache, an ache of creation, not decay. He saw Elena's proud smile, Miguel's satisfied nod. He saw the faces of his neighbours, listening intently, some with tears in their eyes. In that moment he was not just a forgotten old man. He was Arturo Valerio, Luthier of Alarcon, his craft, his purpose, restored. The music, Sophia's music, lived on. Weeks later, the workshop was transformed. Clean, organised light streamed through the now clear window. A small wood stove provided a gentle warmth against the lingering winter chill. Elena, who had decided to extend her stay indefinitely, was sketching designs for a small brochure. "Abuelo," she'd said, "we could offer small repair workshops. Or perhaps you could teach a few young people the basics. Share your knowledge." Arturo had merely grunted, but a pleased smile touched his lips. He was at his workbench, humming softly, a fragment of Sophia's favourite folk tune. He was not working on anything as ambitious as a requinto. In his hands was a small block of fragrant olive wood, and he was carefully sanding its smooth curves. It was to be a simple carved bird, a gift for the mayor's new grandchild. His hands, though still bearing the marks of age and arthritis, moved with a practised, if slower, grace. He paused, looking out the window at the austere beauty of the Alarcon landscape, the ancient walls steadfast against the winter sky. A subtle smile played on his lips. He had found his rhythm again. The silence had been broken, and in its place there was music.